So we have discussed this diagram, right? What is this? Process life cycle, or we also call it the process state diagram. And so right now we are discussing about this part here. So how do processes, they go from the ready state to the running state? How many processes can be in the ready state at a time? As many as possible. And in running, only one. Right? So a process which is in the running state is the one which is allocated the CPU. And we are going to talk about scheduler. And what's the job of scheduler? To select any one of the processes from here, from the ready queue. Right? How should it select one? Any ideas? So we had some ideas in the last class. Priority, yes, that was one idea we discussed. So maybe I should pick the process from the ready queue which is having the maximum priority and allocate it the CPU. Okay, any other idea? Snigdha says long-term scheduler controls how many processes can be there in RAM. It balances CPU bound process and input-output bound processes. Yes, correct. So that was the job of the short-term, long-term scheduler. Now we are talking about the short-term scheduler. So priority was one. So just look at this diagram, right? So this is the result of the PS command on one Linux system. If you look here, there are so many processes having the same priority. So probably all the user processes, most of them will have the same priority. So then how will you decide? So there can be 20 processes having the same priority. Then which one will you choose? Okay, we can choose randomly. Any other idea? The most efficient one. Okay, and how do I define which process is the most efficient? Okay, maybe processing. Come again? We talk about a few parameters. So these are the parameters which we have to keep in mind while selecting a process. So we have to optimize these parameters. We have to choose such a process so that we optimize these parameters. And I can actually sum up all these parameters in just two sentences. The first one is you should maximize CPU utilization. CPU should be working most of the time. Second, you should execute as many processes as possible in as less time as possible. So you should try that a lot of processes should actually terminate. Right? I should not have too many processes in my memory. And third one, you can say I should not keep the processes waiting. Right? So there shouldn't be processes which are just sitting in RAM and waiting and waiting. And the last one, I also have to minimize response time. So that is very important. So maybe I do not keep a process waiting for a long time, but I also have to respond to it quickly. So my first response should be very quick. So these are the few parameters which we have to optimize. And we now have to come up with an algorithm to select processes from RAM in such a way that you optimize these parameters. So what should be the way? So for now, let us assume that all the processes have an equal priority. Although we can do priority scheduling, we will talk about that. We'll look at the processes having high priority and bring them to the CPU. But what if everyone has the same priority? Let's assume all the processes which are sitting in your ready queue, they have an equal priority. How will you choose one? Choose the one with the least burst time. So what it means is I will look at how much time does a process need to execute on the CPU. Maybe one process requires 10 seconds, other requires 100 seconds. So maybe I choose the one which requires 10 seconds. But then the question is, how do I know? This information is not in the process control block. Process control block doesn't have this information, how much time a process requires. I'll come to know of it only when I execute it. So I can write a C code. In that C code, I can have a random function and maybe I print a statement, how many number of times, the random number which I generated multiplied by some thousand. So maybe I'm doing something some random number of times. So there is no way to know in advance for how long a process will run on the CPU. But that's a very good point. We are going to look at that. That is one scheduling algorithm. First
Ma'am,
come first.
you can either do first come first serve or like predictive analysis. Like you can predict which one will consume how much would you say time.
Okay, so Abhinav sums it up. He says we can do two things. We can go with first come, first serve, or we can somehow predict how much time a process will take. And based on this prediction, as you said, we can choose the one which is going to utilize the CPU least. Right? So let's look into this. So this is the first approach, which is first come, first served, and it is definitely the first thing which comes to mind. So what is ready queue? Ready queue is nothing but it's a queue, right? It's a queue of the process control blocks. So whenever you double click on a process, it comes and it sits in the ready queue. You double click on the second process, it comes and sits in the ready queue, and probably after the first process. So as you see in this diagram, so probably P1 was the one which was double clicked before, or which was executed before, or maybe it was created by some other process before. So it came and it sat in the ready queue. Then maybe P1 came after that, P3 came after that. So I have a queue of the processes. And when I have to select one to be executed on CPU, I'll select the one which came the first. So in this case, P0 came the first, so I'll execute it first. Now, when you execute a process on CPU and its CPU burst time is over, it is possible that it is not terminated. So we discussed about this. A process have two kind of bursts, a CPU burst and an input output burst, and they will alternate. It will require CPU for some time, then it will require input output for some more time, then CPU for some time, right? So let's say P0 is the one here which came first. You gave it CPU for some time, and let's say it executed for 3 milliseconds, and after that it requires to do some input output operation. So I can no longer run it here on the CPU. It goes to the blocking state to complete its input output, and then I have to bring another process from the ready queue to the CPU, and I can bring the process which was next in the queue. So P1 comes and it starts executing. Now the question is, what happens to P0 or P0 when its input output is completed? We have addressed this question before also. Do it simply go back to the CPU and start running, or does something else happen? Right, it will go back to the ready queue. It goes back to the ready queue after completing this input output. Sorry. And it will go at the very end of the ready queue. Right? It won't go and sit somewhere in between or in the front. It will go at the end. So that is all about the first come first serve scheduling. So let's take a look at a very simple scenario here. So when you look at this scenario, I want you to keep one thing in mind. So whenever any scheduling policy is to be implemented, we actually do not know of all these parameters. So as you see in this diagram, it's just what I would say a higher view of what is happening in the system. So you in advance will not know all this which is listed here. So it says P1 comes at time 0, P2 comes at time 3. So I'm actually going time by time. So when the CPU, when it is time 0, CPU has no idea that at time 3 P2 is going to come. Right? CPU has no idea. So this is how it is happening along a timeline, but your scheduler doesn't know of all these things. So we are just trying to build a case here and see if this is the case, then what FCFS will do. Right? So take it like this. So let's go time step by time step what is happening. So let's say I booted my system and it is time 0 to just keep things simple. And at time 0, P1 comes. Right? P1 comes, it's converted into a process, it comes and sits in the ready queue. So let's make a ready queue here. I have P1 here. It's the process control block for P1. It sits here. And then there is, so scheduler as of now, it knows nothing else. So for scheduler, there is only one process sitting in the memory. And according to FCFS, it will start executing P1. Right? So this is what is happening in the CPU. So we called it a Gantt chart. It is nothing but a pictorial representation of which process is allocated the CPU. So at time 0, we have given the CPU to this process which is P1. Right? Until when P1 will execute. So definitely at time 1 also, there is no process in RAM. At time 2 also, the RAM is empty, and it is the time 3 when P2 comes, right? So P1 is definitely going to run from time 0 to time 3. What happens at time 3? At time 3, so P1 was out of this queue, and at time 3, P2 comes and P2 becomes a part of the ready queue. So it is the head of the ready queue as of now, if you look at it as a linked list. What happens now? What should execute, P1 or P2? P2? P1. P1 can pause for a while, so it is dependent on us whether we want P1 to pause, or we want P2 to continue, or we want P1 to continue. Right? So this one is a very basic CPU scheduling algorithm, and we'll say I'll keep executing a process for as long as it wants. P1 is not finished yet. So even if P2 comes to the ready queue, I'll keep on executing P1. P2 just sits in the ready queue and it waits. Yes. So that is a problem with this scheduling, right? It's the very, so take it as it's the very first scheduling algorithm which we can think of. It is too simple, and that's why it has the problems which you are referring to. So definitely if I keep executing P1, and let's say if the burst time of P1 was 100, what then? Everyone would just keep waiting and P1 would keep executing, and we do not want that, right? We'll slowly come there. So I'll keep executing P1 here, and I'll actually execute it for all the 10 milliseconds, assuming that the burst time here is in milliseconds. So P1 goes and executes till 10 milliseconds, and during this time, at time 5, P3 comes and sits behind P2, and P4 comes, sits behind P3. P5 has also come by this time and is sitting behind P4. Now I know in which order I have to execute things. So P1 finishes at 10. P1 is done. Now I need to pick a process to execute. So P2 is at the head of my queue. So I take P2 and it's 5. So we execute till 15. Then comes P3. It's 2. You execute it till 17. Comes P4. Execute it till 23. Tell me if I do some wrong calculation. And then P5, it runs till 27. So this is how it looks like. Okay, now let us take a look at these parameters. So how do we compute all these parameters for this thing here? So let's come back here. So what all we have here? So arrival time anyhow we know. Burst time anyhow is given to us. So let's take waiting time, response time, completion time and turnaround time. Let me write it here. So this one is waiting time, response time, turnaround time and completion time. I'm writing completion time first because it is the easiest to calculate. Okay. So completion time for P1 is how much? Can you look at this chart and tell me what's the completion time for P1? 10, right? Okay, for P2? 15, 17, 23 and 27, right? Okay, coming to the turnaround time. So what was turnaround time? Time it took for the process to start again. Okay, yes, so similar to that. So turnaround time is the total time taken by a process here. So time from its arrival to the time it has terminated. So this entire, you can say the time of the life cycle of the entire process, how long it lived. So that is turnaround time. So let's look at P1. So P1 came at 0 in the ready queue and P1 was terminated at 10, right? So that is the time of its entire life cycle. So for P1, the turnaround time is 10. Okay, what is it for P2? I'll appreciate if those of you who are attending online can also type your answers in the chat window. So what is the turnaround time for P2? Yes, it came at 3 and it ended at 15. So it is 12. Okay. What about P3? How come it is 2, Sneha and Snigdha? What went wrong? So let me repeat, turnaround time is the time. So assume you are a process. So turnaround is the time you have spanned between when you came to the ready queue and by the time you were terminated. Right? So you can say it's the time for which a person lives, and in this case the time for which a process lives. Okay, let's look at P3. So for P3 the arrival time is 5 and it ended at 17. So it's 12. For P4, 23 minus 6. And for P5, 27 minus 8. How much is that? 19. Right? Okay. I'll come to response time at the end. Let's look at the waiting time. So waiting time is the time a process spends waiting in the ready queue. So you can compute it two ways. So one way is you look at this entire simulation and look at all the times where a process was waiting. So you look at P2, okay, it came at 3, but it was allocated the CPU at 10. So it waited for 10 minus 3, which is 7 milliseconds. Another easy way to do it is you can just subtract turnaround time from the completion time. Right? So how much is it? So process 1, it never waited. It came at 0 and it got a CPU at 0. Let's look at process 2. It came at 3, got the CPU at, process 2 came at 3 and got it at 10. So it's actually 7. Right? So the formula which I told you was wrong. I messed up. Let's see what exactly is the waiting time in terms of completion time and turnaround time. Okay, let's look at it for P3. So P3 arrival time was 5 and it got CPU at 15. So it is 10 for P3. P4 came at 6, got the CPU at 17. So waiting time is 11. And for P5 it came at 8, got CPU at 23. So it is 23 minus 8. Okay. And let's look at the response time. So what do you think is the correlation between response time and waiting time in this particular case? So response time is the first time the process got a response. Waiting time is the total time it waited in the ready queue, right? So for this particular scheduling algorithm, if you look at it, the waiting time will be equal to the response time, because the very first time I got the response, you are not going to remove me from CPU after that, right? So waiting time will only increase as compared to the response time. If you execute me for some time, remove me from the CPU and then give me back CPU for some more time, only then I will wait. But in this case, whenever I get a response, I complete my execution. So in this particular case, your response time will be equal to the waiting time. So P1 gets its first response at 0. So it's 0. P2 gets its first response as 10. So again 10 minus 3, 7. And the same holds for all the processes here. Now let's, sorry, come again. So response time is a process is sitting in RAM, right? So there will be first time when you will be allocated the CPU. You might be allocated a CPU multiple times. So if we talk about other scheduling algorithms, it might be the case that you get a CPU at 2, CPU is snatched from you at 10, you are again given a CPU at 20. So that from 10 to 20 will be added in the waiting time. In response time, I only care about what was the first time when I was allocated a CPU. So how much time it took for the system to respond to me for the first time. We will discuss about that. right? In this case, it is not, because in this case, I'm not taking away CPU from processes. So see, when P1 was executing, right? So what we did here, we say that at 3, P2 came, but we kept executing P1. Assume that we were using some other scheduling, and at time 3, I actually snatched this CPU from P1 and I gave it to P2, right? So P1 is now waiting again, right? So in this case, response time won't be equal to the waiting time. Okay, can we see a few correlations between all these metrics here? Can you tell me what is this value? So TAT is turnaround time minus BT is burst time. What is this? So think about it logically. Is it arrival time? Arrival plus waiting, or only waiting? Only waiting, right? Turnaround time is the time I came and I sit in the ready queue to the time when I terminated. Burst time is simply the sum of all those times when I was executing on CPU, right? So if I am in the system, I am in the process life cycle, that is TAT. It represents me being in that life cycle, and burst time is all the time when I am running. So if you subtract this, so whatever remains is the time which I was waiting, right? So that is how you can here compute the waiting time. So it's not CT minus TAT, it's TAT minus BT. So turnaround time minus burst time. So you can calculate waiting time like this. So when we look at other scheduling algorithms, computing waiting time by exactly looking at this Gantt chart is going to be cumbersome. So this is how you can compute it there. Okay. So in this particular example, okay, in this particular example, we have made an assumption, and the assumption was each process only requires CPU. We haven't talked about the input output burst here. You'll see most of such examples only in your book, but I'll discuss one more example with you. This kind of example you might see in some competitive exams, right? So here you are given three things. So for every process you are given an arrival time, you are given a CPU burst time, then you are given input output. So it tells me P1 after executing for 3 units on CPU, it needs to do 2 units of input output. Then it needs to be back on the CPU, right? So how will you create a Gantt chart for such a case? So let's look at it. So I'll do some part of it, I'll not finish it. So this one is a big problem. P1 here comes at time 0, right? And P2 also comes at time 0. So which one should I choose? Okay, although you can choose anyone randomly, but generally we assume that the process with a smaller ID will be executed first in case there is a tie. So in this case, P1 has arrived. So P1 starts executing at time 0. So let me give it to P1. And we know that P1 is not going to leave the CPU until it completes its first CPU burst. So P1 will anyhow run till time 3. Right? And at time 3, P1 cannot further run because it requires an input output. So P1 goes for completing this input output. Let me also make my ready queue here side by side. So previously I had P1 and then we had P2. I am at time 3. So by time 3, P3 has also arrived in the system, right? And P1 is anyhow taken away because it's executing on the CPU. And now at time 3, P1 went for input output. And when is P1 going to be back? So P1 is doing the input output for 2 units time. It went at 3, so it will be back at 5. And at 5, it will join the ready queue at the very end. And at 5, P4 is also coming. So two things are happening at 5. P4 is entering the system and P1 is completing its input output and coming back, right? So let me give a priority to a process having smaller ID. So let's say I append P1 and then you have a P4 here. Right? And then what happens at time 3? What will execute? P2, right? Because it is at the head of the ready queue. So here it is P2 which starts executing, and P2 executes till 5. And then P2 goes for its input output. It will be back at 9. It requires 4 units of input output. I'm also making one more heavy assumption here. So I am assuming that every input output for each process is independent of each other, because I do not know how is that input output happening. Maybe P1 was waiting for let's say keyboard, and P2 was waiting for printer. In that case, both the things can be done independently of each other. And if both of them wanted to both of them were waiting for an input from keyboard, in that case they will actually wait in a device queue, right? So if you are given any question of this kind, the things will be mentioned in the question, whether it's independent, whether it's dependent, but most of the time you will not see such a complex question. Okay, so P2 went for input output. It's going to be back at 5 plus 4, 9. Let me write it here. And then at 5, P3 is at the front of the ready queue. P3 starts executing, executes for one time unit, 6. And when it goes for input output, it will also be back at 9. 6 plus 3, 9. And P3 also goes. And then I start executing P1 because it is at the head of the ready queue. So P1 executes. Its next CPU burst is for 2 units. So at 8, P1 is here. P2 and P3 are still not back. They will come at 9. So I have P4 sitting here. P4 executes. This is the first time P4 gets the CPU. And now if you look at P4, it will execute till 10. It will come back at 12. So meanwhile, P2 and P3 will execute. So let's execute P2 and then P3. And then by this time P4 came back, and you can execute P4 here, right? And P4 executes for one time unit. So this is how it looks like. And here if you see the response time, it might not be equal to the waiting time in this particular case. Okay. So what are the benefits of this approach? Definitely it is very simple to implement. I don't have to do anything. Whenever a process comes, I just insert it in the ready queue, and whenever I have to choose a process, I take it away from the head of the ready queue. What is the problem here? Right, we have discussed that before. So if there is one process which requires CPU for a long time, it's going to create a problem. So look at this. Assume that let's look at these two cases. So let's say I have P0, P1 and P2. Let's say P0 came at time 1, it's the arrival time, and both of these they came at time 2. Or let me start from 0. So this one came at 0 and both of these came at time 1. If I look at the burst time, so let's say the burst time for P0 is 24, and let's say for both of these is just 2. Right? So it will make the situation difficult. So at time 0, there is only P0. So at 0, P0 starts executes till 24. Then P1 executes till 26, and then I have P2 which executes till 28. On the other hand, if the situation was slightly different, assume that I again have these three processes, but the arrival time of P0 is slightly late, right? Let's say both of these came at 0. Now if you apply a first come first serve scheduling here, so at time 0, P1 will start executing, will execute till 2. P2 will start executing, will execute till 4, and then P0 will execute till 28. Now if you compare both of these cases, the first one and the second one, CPU utilization is same in both the cases. Throughput is also same in both the cases. So to remind you what throughput is, it is the number of processes you are completing in 1 unit time. So I'm completing same number of processes in 28 units time. So throughput is the same. But what becomes different? So now can you compute the waiting time for these processes and tell me what it is? So let's write down the waiting time in both the cases and see how significantly it differs with just a small change in the arrival time of the processes. So tell me the values. P naught is not at all waiting here, right? P1 is waiting here for 24 milliseconds. And P2 waits for 24 or less. So it came at 1, right? It's allocated at 24, so it's actually 23 to be exact. P2 came at 1, got the CPU at 26, so it waited for 25. Right? So one process is waiting for 23, other is waiting for 25. Now, on the right hand side, if I look at P0, how much is it waiting? So it came at 1, got the CPU at 4. So it's only waiting for 3 units of time. P1 is not waiting at all, and P2 it's waiting for 2 milliseconds. Right? You see how much drastic difference it is in the waiting times in both of these scenarios. So that is the problem with first come first serve. So if a process, let's say which is bigger, by bigger I mean which requires more CPU time, if it comes at the beginning, then it keeps everyone waiting, right? And this problem actually just does not end here. So consider these processes. Let's say I have a process P0, and then I have a process P1, and I have a process P2. So what I'm going to write next is the CPU burst followed by the input output burst. So I'm going to write them alternately. So let's say P0, it requires CPU for 24. So let's say CPU is a very high and calculative process. So I need to do a lot of calculations. So mostly it is running on the CPU. Once in a while it comes to the keyboard to take input from me. So let's say CPU burst is 24, input output burst is 2. Then again it requires CPU for 24. Then again it requires input output for 2. CPU for 24, input output for 2. And let's talk about P1. Let's say P1 is some word processor. So most of the time you are typing here from keyboard, but in between it requires CPU here and there for some small calculations. So let's say it requires CPU for 2 time units. Then it requires input output for 12. CPU for 2, input output for 12, so on and so forth. And let's say P2 is printer. It is printing some paper. So it's also using CPU. Give me a second. Two, 12, 2, 12, 2, 12, right? Now, if you prepare a Gantt chart for this and see what is happening, so just look at it, what is happening here. So initially, let's say P0 gets the CPU, and now P0 is anyhow sitting here for 24 time units. And during all this time, P1 and P2 are waiting, and they are waiting even if they require the CPU just for 4 time units. And what is happening to our input output devices at that time? They are also underutilized. So P1 and P2, they are not able to use the keyboard, neither they are able to use the printer, just because P0 has occupied the CPU and P1 and P2 require CPU for very less time. So during this time, my input output devices are being idle. So not just CPU utilization, even the utilization of input output devices is falling. And what happens after this 24 time? P0 goes, does its input output. So it requires input output for a very small amount of time. It finishes in 2 milliseconds and it comes back and sits in the ready queue. It's ready again to take the CPU, right? So let's say what's happening after 24. P1 here runs till 26, P2 here runs till 28. And during all this time, P0 is actually back and it is sitting in the ready queue, right? And after this, P1 and P2, they go and go to finish their input output. After 12 milliseconds, they will be back. So 28 plus 12, it is near to 40. During all this time, P0 is running because it was back in the ready queue. At 40, P1 and P2 are now again back in the ready queue. Their input output is completed. And they again wait for P0 to complete. The situation becomes the same, what it was before. So they'll have to again wait for the next 12 milliseconds for P0 to complete. And what if these values were even higher than 24? The situation will become all the bad. So if you imagine this situation, it becomes something like this, right? So this is a longer job here. This is P0 in our case. It keeps sitting on the CPU all the time and it is blocking all these small processes which requires CPU for small time. So this effect, it is known as convoy effect. It brings the utilization of input-output devices down, and it also increases the waiting time of these small processes. So that is one problem with your first come first serve algorithm. Okay. So I thought of discussing one more algorithm here, but maybe I'll just stop here. When is your next class starting? Okay, so for the people online, we are done. I just spent some time with the students offline. At least I'll see their faces and ask their names. And I think we are done with the class. So you can leave now.